Hey, Luke. Hey, Zoe. How's everyone doing today? Hope you're going somewhere fun, Zoe. All right, terrific. Hello from the otter slide. The sea otters is my favorite exhibit at the zoo. I love going there, watching them. They have at the Philadelphia Zoo, the otter cage or enclosure, I guess, is part of it's underwater. So it's got a clear glass in front of it. So you can see the otters as they're swimming under the water. It's really very cool. Yeah, they are very cute. I agree. All right. Anybody have any questions before we get started today? Okay, that's fine. No problem. All right. Let me get my screen share. Okay. Let me know if you can't see that. All right. Before we get started, there's always a little bit of housekeeping for the first half of the class. So we're in our 8th week already. Can you guys believe it? We have we only have 16 weeks in a semester. So we are half done with first semester, meaning we are 1/4 done with the whole class. I think it's going really quickly. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about class participation. For the most part, you guys are doing a terrific job. I really do appreciate it. I know it can be a little intimidating. Sometimes you might feel like you're a little nervous to give an answer because maybe it's wrong, or maybe you don't you want to ask something but you're afraid to ask the question. Just keep in mind that we've been together now long enough that I feel like we're all friends. Feel like that everybody here wants you to do well, and odds are pretty good that if you don't understand something, somebody else doesn't understand it as well. So you're kind of the hero when you ask a question because you help everyone to get the answer. Now, one thing that was pointed out to me is that maybe some of you are raising your hand and I'm not seeing it. So I want to talk about why that might be happening. There's a couple of reasons that I may not call on you if you raise your hand. First of all, if you just go like this, see the difference between this, like if you're raising your hand here as opposed to this, or even this, so move your hand a little bit and maybe I'll see you a little bit better. Another thing is that we have differences in internet speed here. So I want to show you guys with a little demonstration of how different our internet speeds are. So everybody turn off your, unmute your microphones. So click where it says unmute so we can all hear each other. And I'm going to do ready, set, go. And when I say go, we're all going to sing happy birthday at the same time. Okay, ready, set, go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, everyone. Happy birthday to you. Okay, everybody done? So you see, you get the idea here. The timing is off because we all have different internet speeds. We get things at different times. So it's possible that by the time you raise your hand, I've already called on somebody else. So here's what you do. Here's what I want you to do. If you feel like you want to answer, wave a little bit like this. I know nobody wants to be that, oh, teacher, pick me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, move your hand a little bit or type a question mark in the chat box. And I like to keep an eye on the chat box. It's not always easy for me to do when there's a lot of chatter, but you guys are really good. Some classes, there's just a lot of talking back and forth. I think you guys are doing a really good job of keeping the non-class chat to a minimum, non-class related. All right. So any questions about that? Okay, just a heads up for all of you guys, we may have a bigger class next week because some people from the Monday section are going to join us. I'm not going to be around on Monday. I had to cancel classes on Monday, so we may have other students here. So be just as welcoming to them as you are to me. All right, and to one another. Okay, Now let's move right on to, so you can, yeah, you're all silent again. Good. Thank you. We did this lab together last week, so I want to talk about the results. For those of you who did the lab as opposed to observing, did you have anything unusual or surprising happen? Anything different than the results that I got and sent you the pictures of? Lillian.
Somehow, the jar with the plant in it turned more green and yellow.
More green yellow. Okay,
Yes.
let's troubleshoot that. What do you think might have happened?
I think it was because the plant was dying. I'm wondering if it was like just decaying and releasing carbon dioxide into the water.
That's a possibility. If the plant was dying, it's probably not performing photosynthesis anyway. So it could be that there just was, it wasn't taking the carbon dioxide out of the water. Yeah, that's a possibility. I don't know. What anybody have any other thoughts? Why maybe did the one with the plant in it turn green? Greener? There's a lot of possibilities. There could have been maybe the inside of the glass wasn't, maybe it was had a little bit of soap on it, or had something else. Maybe the plant itself was not a good kind of plant that performs a lot. Different plants perform photosynthesis at different rates, so that's a possibility. Maybe it just wasn't a highly photosynthetic plant. Yeah, Shmuel.
Maybe the packing material was like a carbon compound, so that when you put it into with the plant, then it disintegrated. And
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. It was picking up the, CO2 from that. Eliza.
In my experiment at the end, after 24 hours, both of my experimental tubes were still green and my control was clear.
Ah, interesting. So you really didn't have any photosynthesis in either of the tubes. Now, did you leave it a little bit longer?
I actually still have it, but I
Okay.
haven't been recording, so maybe I'll go see if anything happened.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see if even a few days later, some photosynthesis occurred. Marianne.
So maybe the plant wasn't aquatic.
Yep, that's a possibility. Now, if you got it out of the water, odds are pretty good it was, or if you got it from a fish tank store, pet store in the fish tank department, hopefully they give you the right plant, but maybe not. If it wasn't aquatic and you put it underwater, then it is not going to thrive there. It's going to be fighting for its life rather than putting it into generating sugar. Yeah, that's a possibility. I don't know. Those are all good thoughts. I don't know for sure which one of those it was. It's also possible that it just didn't have enough light. So maybe if you had put it somewhere for a couple days in bright sunlight, that could have been. We all know that plants do better in the sun than they do in the shade. At least most plants do. So maybe that was it. Now, I will tell you, when I did mine, I put mine under, I have a hydroponic garden, and I set it right next to my hydroponic garden. So that was the light that I got. So that was full spectrum light as opposed to a light bulb. That could be why mine so, definitely turned blue, because it was definitely performing photosynthesis. Yeah, interesting. All right, so let's look at the hypothesis again. Remember, this is the hypothesis that we did. So what was our independent variable? Independent variable is the one you change. You're welcome, Lillian. I know how much you love that song. What was the independent variable? Luke?
The independent variable is the light, like the amount of light.
Exactly. Remember, in this one, we had kind of a two-part independent variable. It also could have been the plant, because we didn't put a plant in our control. So we did put a plant in both the experimental, and then one experimental was exposed to the light. So we had two, for sure. So what was the dependent variable? What were we measuring? Marianne?
The color of the bromothymol blue.
Yeah, exactly. The color of our bromothymol blue solution. Right. So this could be our hypothesis. This is what we talked about last week. If a plant is placed in a bromothymol blue solution and placed in the light, The if is the independent variable. Then the color of the solution will change from greenish yellow to blue, hopefully. Now we could also turn this into an if then because hypothesis. Anybody have any thought what the because could be? If we place it in the light, then the color will change because, Shmuel.
The plant will take out the CO2 and emit oxygen.
Yeah, very good. The plant will perform photosynthesis and it will remove CO2 from the solution, and then the bromothymol blue will change back to the color it is when there isn't CO2 in it. So we could do that because the plant will give off oxygen and take in carbon dioxide as it performs photosynthesis. Excellent. You don't always have to have that because that's not a necessary part. I just wanted to show you how we could do it. All right, so then we followed all these procedures and you guys did number 7 and well, we did the 7 together. You did number 8 on your own using the images that I sent you. So I'm going to show you the pictures that I sent you again, and then I'll show you how I completed my chart. So if you got something different, you know, it's because one of the two of you who didn't have any change had different results, but we'll talk about all those. So what was our initial color in all 3 of the test tubes? Remember what the initial color after we blew in the carbon dioxide, that is. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm seeing chats. Okay. Yeah, it was, I said that it was yellowish green, greenish, yellowish, green, yellow, anything like that would be good. So that's what I thought it was on all of those. Okay. Now this was that was the initial. This was the 15-minute. So at 15 minutes, what color was the control? Yeah, hadn't changed. Still yellowish green. The experimental and the experimental light and dark were all yellowish green. What about at 30 minutes? What did I see at 30 minutes? Yeah, still the same. All 3. They were all 3 yellowish green. So I sent this picture or one like it. They were all 3 yellowish green. What about after an hour? Was there any change after an hour in any of them? Here's what it looked like. No, there still wasn't any change. There was no change. They were all still yellowish green. What about 8 hours? There's the 8 hour. Yeah, the light was right there. So I've got the experimental light had turned a little bit blue. So I wrote yellowish green, pale blue, yellowish green for that one. And then the last one was the 24-hour one. And at this point, my blue was really blue. The experimental light was a bright blue color. The others were all yellowish green. Yeah. Yep. The light was really blue. Yeah. It got back to almost as dark as the original. Not quite, but almost. All right. Now let's talk about the analysis of this lab. So how did you answer question 1? Describe what happened to the color of the bromothymol blue in the test tubes with and without the plant under light conditions. So what the analysis is, if you were doing this as a lab report, this is the kind of stuff you do in your lab report. You would analyze it. You'd say what happened to the color. Shmuel.
With light and with the plant, then the color turned blue, and without the plant or without the light, nothing happened.
Yeah, good. Shmuel, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. I don't know if you're not, maybe get a little bit closer to your microphone. It's just I can hear you, but really barely. Yeah, good. So what we ended up having was it became blue under the light when it had the plant in it. It didn't become blue when it didn't have the plant. All right, so the next one. What does that color change indicate about the concentration of carbon dioxide in each setup? So how were the 3 different with regards to carbon dioxide? Shmuel?
The more carbon dioxide, the bluer the more carbon dioxide, the greener, yellower the solution, and the more oxygen, the more blue the solution was.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So the reality is it's more the less carbon dioxide it has, but at the same time that we had less carbon dioxide, we also had more oxygen. So it is a test to see if the carbon dioxide is in there, is what we're testing with this bromothymol blue. But yeah, it absolutely, because the plant was putting out oxygen, it was going to be more blue when there was less carbon dioxide and more oxygen. All right, number 3, how does this experiment demonstrate photosynthesis? Marianne.
So if we put the plant in the light, it does undergo photosynthesis, but if it doesn't, if we don't put it in the light, it doesn't.
Yeah, very good. So we saw photosynthesis in the one that had the plant and was exposed to light. It will undergo because we saw the color change. Speaking of which, Marianne, I love your background. Autumn is my favorite season, so I'm loving all the color that we have now. All right, now the last question. Compare the results in light and dark conditions. What differences did you observe? What do these results tell you about the role of light in photosynthesis? So let's just focus on that last one because we already compared the results and we talked about the differences. What does this tell you about the role of light? Zoe?
It tells you that light is really essential for photosynthesis to actually work correctly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's vital. We have to have light. You put a plant in a dark closet, it's going to die. It will not be able to perform photosynthesis. Therefore, it will not be able to make glucose. Therefore, it won't have any glucose to use to make ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Without energy, the plant's going to die. Yep, photosynthesis is absolutely important. All right, now, finally, conclusion. Summarize the results of your experiment and explain whether your hypothesis was supported. So these two are both important in a conclusion. You want to just give a little brief summary in your conclusion about the results of your experiment. You don't have to restate the whole thing again, but you kind of want to tell what happened as a result of your experiment. And then, was our hypothesis supported or not? So this was our hypothesis. Was it supported? Yes or no? Yeah, it was supported. So we would give a little summary and then we would say that, that our hypothesis was supported. Zoe, your hand's still up. Do you have a question or is it just, go ahead. Okay, okay. All right. Anybody have any questions about the lab? All right. Just by a show of hands, how many of you guys have a Gmail email account? Well, let's do it this way. How many do not have a Gmail email account? Oh, so you all do. Okay. I'm doing an experiment with something. I want to try having the next lab sheet that you do submitted to me through Gmail. So knowing that you all have it helps. I was going to have to set up a separate account for you if you didn't. So that helps. Okay. Let's move on to a little case study about photosynthesis. So I want to do a quick review of it first before we move on. Did I show you guys the jokes already? I can't remember if I showed you these last week. No? All right. What did the little plant say to his mom at dinner time? Oh, Mom, sunlight again. And I like this one. Just the steak for me, and my friend will have the carbon dioxide and the water with the sunlight. And then for the musicians among you, a photosynthesizer. All right, here's what you really need to know about photosynthesis. Remember that this process is essential. It basically provides the foundation for almost all life on Earth because it produces oxygen. That's one reason. And the other reason is that it gives the energy source. It gives that glucose, which then is used by the mitochondria to make ATP, to make energy. Now, this here is the general formula for photosynthesis. Notice how I have light energy up here above the dotted line. Light is generally not considered a reactant in any kind of a chemical reaction, even when light is required. So we often will put it up here. Now you will sometimes see it here like this. You'll see it written like this. That's okay. That's fine. Just keep in mind, light is not it's not matter. Usually it is matter that we put in as the reactant and the products. All right. So Photosynthesis uses energy from the sun and it converts water that the plant gets through the roots, and carbon dioxide, which the plant gets from the air, to produce glucose and oxygen. It converts that water and glucose into those two products. It happens inside the chloroplasts in a plant cell. Plants need that CO2, sunlight, and water in order to perform photosynthesis. A lot of energy is stored in a glucose molecule, way, way more than would be good to just release into the cell. So we have to have a storage unit, a small way to store little bits, and that's what that ATP is all about. All right. There are two stages of photosynthesis. There are the light reactions, which require light, and the Calvin cycle, sometimes called the dark reaction because it doesn't require light. All right, the first stage being the light-dependent reaction. What happens is the sun shines on those chlorophyll molecules. They start to vibrate and they break apart the water, the H2O, the water that comes in. They break it up so that it becomes oxygen and hydrogen. They need the hydrogen, but they don't need the oxygen, so they release that oxygen to us. The hydrogen from the H here is added to NADP. That becomes NADPH, which goes into the Calvin cycle. All right, now, the next cycle is the Calvin cycle, aka dark reaction or light independent reaction. They all mean the same thing. They take that ATP that was made in the light reaction and the NADPH that was made in the light reaction, and this is where carbon dioxide comes in. They convert that carbon from the carbon dioxide into glucose. Sunlight gives the energy that's needed. The oxygen that's released is critical for our survival, for anything that is an aerobic organism. Aerobic means requires oxygen. And it is the basis for food chains. It allows plants, which are producers, to create those energy-rich compounds that we then eat. We depend on those energy-rich compounds. Not only does it give us energy when we eat those plants that have performed photosynthesis, we get the energy from the glucose. We also get carbon from them. We get carbon to build up our own bodies. So we get the building blocks that we need to build up our own bodies, and they play a really important role in the carbon cycle because they remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Doing so helps to regulate Earth's atmosphere. And then, of course, we use cellular respiration to get the energy out of that glucose molecule. All right, question. How come the plants don't just store the oxygen for cellular respiration? They do use a little bit for their own cellular respiration. They have to have a little bit. That's a good question. They just don't need anywhere near what they take in through the water, right? So they take in water through their roots. They need a lot of hydrogen and only a little bit of oxygen. So they do keep a little. They don't release all of it, but they release most of it. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. All right. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration are often considered the opposites of one another, opposite reactions, because they have the products of one become the reactants of the other. So here you can see that these are the products of mitochondria. It produces CO2 and water. CO2 and water is needed by the chloroplast to do photosynthesis. Their products are glucose and oxygen, and those are the reactants that are needed to go into the mitochondria for cellular respiration. So I want to talk a little bit about this light spectrum because, as we know, light is critical for photosynthesis. Now, many of you guys live in parts of the country where the leaves are turning red and yellow now. I want to talk in a minute about well, let me do that now. I want to talk about the reason for that. Anybody know why? Why are we seeing yellow and orange and reds in the trees right now? Shmuel.
Because there's less and less sun, so there are less chlorophylls, and the chlorophylls are the green pigments. So the other pigments that couldn't be seen because it was mostly chlorophyll are now showing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So when we've got these plant pigments that are inside the chloroplast, the chlorophyll is the main one. So chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B are the main pigments. There are also carotenoids and xanthophylls that give us the yellows and the oranges and the greens. Now, chlorophyll isn't produced anymore when the temperature drops. So the green that was masking those other colors is gone. And now the other colors, which were always there, can shine through. The thing about these other colors, the carotenoids and the xanthophylls, they don't die quite as quickly as the chlorophyll does, right? So they're not as fragile. So they're still there even after the chlorophylls died. It takes colder temperatures for longer in order for those carotenoids and xanthophylls to stop being produced. And then once that's happening and there's no ability to make sugar anymore at all, then the leaves drop off of the trees. Yeah, you guys have bright green in Texas and Florida. Yeah, yeah. Well, I do like the change of the seasons. All right, so what we're looking at right here, this is the electromagnetic spectrum. And the electromagnetic spectrum, it tells us all the light that comes from the sun. So light comes from the sun, but we only see part of it. We don't see gamma rays or X-rays or ultraviolet, infrared, microwaves, or radio waves. We just see this little narrow range right here. Now, plant pigment molecules also can only use a narrow range. They don't even use the whole visible spectrum. They absorb light in the wavelengths between 400 and 700 right here. Now, that is what we call the photosynthetically active radiation. So violets and blues, those have very short wavelength. They also have the most energy. The reds have long wavelengths and the least amount of energy. Our eye sees different wavelengths as different colors, right? So when there's a wave of a certain length, we'll see it as blue. If the wave is longer, we'll see it as orange or red, depending on the length of it. Now, sunlight is actually a mixture of all the colors of light. It's all the different wavelengths that we see. So photosynthetic plants are going to absorb sunlight into their pigment, right? Into that chlorophyll or xanthophyle or carotenoids. The plants that are going to use that energy to power the synthesis of organic molecules like glucose. So chlorophyll's the green one. And as we learned last week, chlorophyll absorbs light very well in this spectrum right here, the blue-green spectrum. It absorbs light very well. It absorbs light really well in the red spectrum, but it does not absorb light very well in this green range right here. So green light is reflected back. That's why chlorophyll looks green, because the light that we see is what's being reflected back. So when you look at an apple, that's because the apple is not absorbing the red. If it's a red apple, it's not absorbing the red light. It's reflecting the red light back at you. So that's what you see. So you can see it right here. Of all of the pigments that plants use to absorb light, none of them absorb as much green as they do other wavelengths. Now, think about it. When you consider that most of the energy that comes from the sun is actually in the green spectrum, most of what we can see is in the green spectrum, that seems pretty wasteful, doesn't it? That a plant wouldn't make use of it. Why do you think that is? Why do you think plants don't make use of that green spectrum? All right, here we got an answer. Let's see. Is it too much? Yeah, that's kind of a good way to put it. The reason is because to accept it would damage the plant. It would be too much radiation for the plant. You can kind of think of the not absorbing the green as sunscreen for the plant. So remember that the sun emits all those wavelengths, everything from radio to gamma rays. And most of the energy that is in the visible spectrum is in that blue-green light. You really might say that the sun is blue-green, It actually, there's a lot of blue-green, more than any of the other colors, but plants reflect it back. It gets it really complex, but basically it's a protective mechanism that keeps the DNA in the plant cells from getting too much sunlight. So plants are going to ignore the most energy-rich part of sunlight because it matters more to them to not be destroyed than it does to get a lot of energy, right? So in general, let's see here. In general, light absorbed in the blue region over here on this side is used for plant growth, and light absorbed in the red and far red are used as cues for flowering and orienting, meaning turning in there. I got a couple questions here. Let me go back here. So, what about trees that stay green all year long? Well, they keep getting sunlight and they keep getting warm enough temperatures that they keep performing photosynthesis, and they keep producing chlorophyll. That's why they stay green, because they never stop producing chlorophyll. Evergreen trees, yeah. When you think too hard about it, leaves should always be red. Well, energy it's more the strength of the pigment than the energy found in the color that comes from the sun. The pigment itself doesn't have more energy. Sunlight does, and it's not absorbing that sunlight in the green spectrum. Okay, I wonder what life would be like if we didn't see the reflected colors. Yeah, everything would be kind of a different color, wouldn't it? Or all sort of gray, I think. Smuel.
Two things. First of all, if I thought that the blue was the fastest, so wouldn't that be more energetic than the green? And also, how come the evergreens in cold areas like covered in snow or whatever keep on producing chlorophyll and other trees don't?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Let me see here. So part of it has to do with their the shape of their leaves. So you know how the needles on a pine tree are real thin and real fine, and there's really a lot of them. So that helps them to continue to produce photosynthesis even though they get cold. The shape of the needle, which is the leaf, right? The needle is the leaf of a plant. It's very different shape, and that sort of helps to keep the plant, I don't want to say warmer, but not as affected by the cold. We'll go into a lot more of this when we talk about gymnosperms, which is what these pine trees are called. When we talk about plants in the right after the first of the year, we'll talk about those. So we'll go into a lot more detail about that. And what was your second part of our first part of your question?
Yeah, isn't the blue light the most energetic?
So yeah, look at this one here. So blue light is down here in the gamma rays. It doesn't really show it here. So it does look like, yeah, it does look like it is. Like there would be more energy in the blue. It has to do with the there being more. Again, it doesn't show it in this picture. This picture is not a good representation. There's more of the green light that comes from the sun. So the sun actually should look green to us, but it doesn't. It should look green to us because there's more green light coming. Why do you think it doesn't? Why do you think the sun isn't green? It's actually because it's got a lot of green. So picture this right here being real wide. That would be, most of it's going to be in that. That's a good thought, Ava, and it may have something to do with it. Remember that all the energy from the sun, if you mix all those colors together, they really should be white. So the sun should either be white or green, but it's yellow. Why do you think? Anybody have any thoughts, Leo?
It's a combination of those two colors.
It is kind of a combination of those two colors. You're on the right track. Think about what light does when it enters our atmosphere. Why is the sky blue? Space isn't blue. What do you think? Yeah, well, no, there you go. Umar says it gets refracted. So reflection and refraction are different. But when light comes in from the sun, our atmosphere does a really good job at scattering that blue light, right? It scatters the blue light way more efficiently than it scatters any other color of light. That little bit of scattering takes the blue out and it makes the sun look yellow to us. That's why sunlight appears to be yellow, because of the scattering of the blue in the atmosphere. Yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? If any of this was different. Wait, does that mean in space the sun is green or white? Well, once again, remember that things look different in space. There's the darkness of space. There isn't an atmosphere to capture any of the color. So the view from space. I'm going to look this one up. This is one I don't know the answer to. All right, what color does the sun look from space? I've never been there, so I don't know. It does appear white. This is because it emits light across all wavelengths, and when viewed without the Earth's atmosphere scattering certain wavelengths, which causes the sun to appear yellow from the ground, it shows its true color, a combination of all colors, which results in white light. Yeah, very good. Good question, Leo. All right. Yeah, there are some blue stars too. What is reddish orange, Zoe? What do you mean? The sun? Is that what you're saying? What does it mean? True color. Everything depends on surroundings. Yeah, well, that's a good point. What is truth? Yeah, so the true color would be the combination of all the colors when they are not being scattered. So it's as if out in space, nothing's being scattered. So that's what we mean by true, is the color that's coming from the sun without any influence at all. Photos seen the sun from space are orange. It may have something to do with the cameras that they took. So did any of you guys see the Northern Lights half a week ago? Did anybody see it? One thing that was really interesting, the people who took pictures of the sky when the Northern Lights were here, it looked much more vibrant in pictures than it did in reality. Eleni, did you see that? Did you notice that it looked more vibrant in your pictures? Yeah. Yeah, so there's something about the exposure to the camera, and I don't know enough about pictures to see that. Let me check this question. Does the sun appear white when you get close to it? Yes, the sun would still appear white, because the white comes from the fact that the sun emits all visible wavelengths of light, which combine to create white light. Even as you approach the sun, the absence of an atmosphere to scatter light means it would continue to appear light, although the intensity of light would become overwhelming due to immense brightness and radiation at closer distances. Yeah, don't go looking at it. All right, Marianne says cameras can see more colors than we can. That's why our remote control signals look red when aimed at the camera. Yeah, maybe that's why it's more vibrant. Maybe. Yeah, that's a possibility. All right, so let's continue on here. So the important thing of this is that I'm going to skip over this one because I want to make sure we have time for this little case study that I have. The color of light that you see is the color that is not being absorbed. When you look at a yellow banana, the yellow is not being absorbed, it's being reflected. The other colors are being used. All right. I want to do this case study now about photosynthesis. So here we have our scenario. This is Heidi. Heidi has become interested in gardening. She's planted a small potted garden in her dorm room, but she's distressed because her garden isn't growing. She waters her plants every few days, just like the gardening books say. She has placed them near the window to get light, but her roommate, Mary, insists on keeping a translucent green curtain in the window. Mary wants to keep the curtain closed because she likes to sleep late, and she often forgets to open it when leaving for class. Heidi hasn't made a big deal about it because it is translucent, and it lets some light through. One morning, Heidi asks Mary to stop at Pike's nursery to buy some fertilizer on her way home from work. Mary replies that she can save Heidi some money by getting some fertilizer from her dad's storage shed when she goes home the next weekend. Mary's dad is a corn farmer and has all the best plant products. When Mary returns from home, she brings Heidi a bit of fertilizer in a paper bag labeled atrazine. After fertilizing the plants once, Heidi notices that the plants seem to be dying. The leaves are turning yellow around the edges. Finally, Heidi asks Mary to drive her to Pikes so that she can ask someone who works there about why her plants are dying. When she arrives at Pikes, Heidi begins talking to an employee named John. She tells him everything. When she finishes, John tries to hold back the laughter as he explains to Heidi why her plants are dying. All right, so here's what we're going to do. This is our task. We're going to answer these two questions. Heidi made 2 gardening mistakes. Given what you're learning about photosynthesis, why weren't the plants growing? And why are they now quickly dying? So let's do number 1 first. Given what you know about photosynthesis, why weren't the plants growing in Heidi's dorm room? Marianne.
The curtains were translucent, but they were green, so it's kind of lacking red and blue light.
Right, so whatever light comes through is shining through the green curtain and becoming green as it shines on the plant. Aliza.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Okay, Luke.
Yeah, probably the lack of light, and also maybe if she hasn't watered it, could be another thing.
Yep, could be. Could be. All right, yeah, Leo says because of the translucent green curtain. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is part of the problem. So that is question number 1. And the green curtain is the problem. First of all, any curtain is going to limit light. Even if it was like a white translucent curtain, it's going to limit some of the light. The green is going to change the white light to green, and green is the least effectively absorbed by chlorophyll and gives the lowest rate of photosynthesis. The chlorophyll is going to begin to break down and the leaves are going to begin to turn yellow and die. All right, question number 2. Why are the plants now quickly dying? I'm going to give you a hint. Look up atrazine or Atrex. Look up atrazine. Atrazine. Somebody look up and tell me what you find. Aliza.
It's used to it's an herbicide used to control weeds, so
Right.
it wasn't
So what do you
meant.
think it's doing to the plants?
It's killing the
Yeah,
plants.
yeah, it's killing them. Right. The way it works is it blocks the electron transport chain. So if you've gotten there in the lessons, the process of cellular respiration inside your mitochondria to make ATP has 3 parts to it. Part number 1 is called glycolysis. Part number 2 is the Krebs cycle. And part number 3 is called electron transport. Electron transport is where the vast majority of ATP is made. It's the powerhouse of the cellular respiration process. If we block the electron transport chain, electrons cannot be used to make energy, to make ATP. Without ATP, those cells are going to die. They're not going to be able to have the energy they need to do the processes that they need. All right, so atrazine is an herbicide that kills plants rather than fertilizing them. Without ATP, they cannot carry out these processes and they die. All right, so we figured out the problem. Now we have to come up with a solution. What does Heidi need to do to fix the problem? Shmuel.
First step would be to get rid of the curtain, and second step would be to stop sprinkling it with poison.
Okay, I forget. I couldn't hear what you said first.
Remove the curtain.
Yeah, yeah. She needs to get those plants out of the way of the curtains, and putting them in direct sunlight is a good idea. Don't trust Mary. Ditch the curtains and buy actual fertilizer. Yeah. Remove the curtains and stop using the pesticide. Yeah, so those are definitely 2 things that she needs to do. And the third thing, one of you guys said that. Who said ditch the... Remove the, here we go. Luke says buy actual fertilizer. Yeah, buying fertilizer that promotes the growth of plants would be a really good thing for her to do. So taking the curtain away would really help. If you've got plants that aren't doing real well, putting them in direct sunlight is often the best thing to do. We certainly don't want to be using plant killers on our garden plants. So that would be something that that would be good to do. All right, now we know the things that we have to do. That's these 3 things right here. Put them in direct sunlight without any curtains. Stop using Atrex. Use a fertilizer that promotes the growth of plants. We can use these 3 things that we need to do, right? Those are our independent variables, the things we're going to change in order to write a testable hypothesis. So remember, a testable hypothesis is necessary because if you can't test it, you can't prove it or disprove it. You have to be able to test it. Hold on. If the roommate won't want to move the curtains, she could get a timed plant light that would be, yeah, she could. That's a possibility. She could do that. An outer wall that does, yep, that would be a possibility. Okay, so let's write our testable hypothesis. What could our if be here? Marianne.
Any of the 3, so like, put the plants in direct sunlight, then it will grow, or if we stop using Atrix, then it will grow, or the 3rd one.
Yeah. So is this a controlled experiment? If you did it the way Marianne just said, yeah, it would be. If we did all 3, differently. If we changed them all, it would not be. If we put the plants in direct sunlight and stopped using Atrex and used a fertilizer, that's not a controlled experiment. That's changing 3 variables. So we don't want to do that whenever we can, but sometimes you want to. Like in Heidi's case here, she just wants her plants to live. She's not interested in running scientific experiments. She's going to do all 3 things. So she's going to say, okay, if the plants are placed in direct sunlight and Atrex is not used and a fertilizer is used, those are her 3 independent variables. Independent variable is the one you change. So if they're placed in sunlight and no atrazine is applied and a fertilizer that promotes growth is used, then, and the then is what we're going to be measuring. It's going to be what we're looking for. We're going to look for the plants to recover and grow. Right. Excellent. Now we could do 3 controlled experiments. If we really wanted to see what is, I think we probably all know that all 3 of these are the problem, right? You have to change all of them because if we just started using a fertilizer but continued using the atrazine, the plant's still going to die. Excellent. All right. Anybody have any questions about photosynthesis before we leave it behind? We'll talk a little bit more about photosynthesis when we talk about plants, because you can't talk about plants without talking about them. But I want to spend the rest of our time here talking a little bit about cellular respiration. So remember that it's basically the reverse of photosynthesis. The products of one become the reactants for the other. Now, plants make glucose. They need to make glucose and they perform cellular respiration too, just like all living things do. All living things have to have a way to make energy, to make ATP, and cellular respiration is what we use to do that. So plants in photosynthesis make glucose. They release most of the oxygen from the water that they took in because they don't need so much. It's just a byproduct. We benefit from both. So we benefit from the oxygen they release. We benefit when we eat the plant because we get the glucose. Glucose combines with other molecules in order to make other sugars too. The problem is we take in this glucose when we eat the plant, but we can't use it that way. It's too big. It's basically got too much energy in it. We have to break it apart and get the energy out of that glucose molecule. And the way we do that is through cellular respiration, which takes place inside the mitochondria. All right, now, once again, this is our photosynthesis reaction. Look at the equation. We read it just like a math equation. 6 carbon dioxides plus 6 water in the presence of light energy yields a glucose and 6 oxygen molecules. The oxygen and the glucose go into cellular respiration in order to produce ATP. You can see right here, the reactants of one are the products of the other. All right, now, think about everything that you're doing right now. Think about the things that you're doing voluntarily. I mean, you're hearing, you might be tapping your feet, you're sitting down, might be moving around a little bit, right? Now think about the things that you're doing involuntarily. You're digesting your lunch. You're not thinking about that. It's just happening. Your nerves are firing. You're breathing. Well, now that I said it, you're doing it voluntarily too. Once we call attention to breathing, now you're aware of your breathing. But you're not aware of your heart beating. You can't really control your heart. You can't really control the fact that your bones are making blood cells and your immune system cells are on the alert, well, going through your body looking for troublemakers. There's all kinds of chemical reactions that are happening inside your body. There's movement into and out of cells and around the outside of your body. All of those things need energy in order to do their work. Everything I mentioned, everything that goes on has to have energy. And where does that energy come from? Where does the energy to power you come from? It's a couple of different answers here. The sun, yeah, it comes first from the sun, then into our food in the form of plants. Yep, you're all right. All of these answers are correct. Or other animals, things that you eat, then into our mitochondria for cellular respiration, which makes what? ATP, yeah, which stands for what? Adenosine triphosphate. Excellent. Wow, Marianne, that's even spelled right. Well done. Not an easy word, not an easy combination of words to spell. Yeah. So ATP has one adenosine and 3 phosphates. That's the ATP. So you eat food, and through a series of very complicated chemical reactions, you end up getting the ATP out of the end result of the cellular respiration. Now we write it this way, and together all the steps that are involved are called cellular respiration. We write it like this: glucose plus 6 oxygens yields 6 carbon dioxide, 6 water, and ATP. So ATP is a molecule that holds energy. So it is a product. It is matter. It is a molecule. All right, now let's look at the reactants of cellular respiration, the things that go in. They're sugar and oxygen. The most common sugar is glucose. What happens if there isn't any sugar? What happens if there's no glucose to go into this reaction? Will the reaction work? No, can't work. Just like photosynthesis can't happen without light, cellular respiration can't happen without glucose. What if there's not enough oxygen? No, the whole process of cellular respiration can't work. Now, part of it can. We'll learn about that. The first part, glycolysis. You can make a little bit of ATP without oxygen, but you pay a price for it. Yeah, fermentation. That's what it is. It's not very efficient, though. Not very efficient at all. What happens to the CO2 that is the product of cellular respiration? Yeah, it's breathed out. It's exhaled, goes out into our atmosphere where the plants take it back in. Yeah, excellent. All right. This is what an ATP molecule looks like. So these at the end here, the kind of yellow 3, 1, 2, 3, those are the phosphates. Now, the last bond is the one that's broken off right here. I can't freeze this. I wish I could, but I can't. That last phosphate, those bonds between those phosphate molecules, they have a lot of energy in them. And when one is broken off, the energy is released from that. We may have to finish this up next. The blue on the end, that's the adenosine right here. So the whole thing is adenosine. I'm not sure what that atom is. Let me see if I can see it with atomic structure here. It's going to be carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, or nitrogen. Oh, it's actually a hydrogen and oxygen together. Oh, there it froze. Look at that. All I had to do is click the other screen. So right here where the bonds are, where the yellow is, so each of these balls represents an atom. So this one right at the very end here is a hydroxide. That's an OH combination of atoms. HBio.
Is there any other substitute except for glucose, like another carbohydrate that the body could use for cellular respiration?
Well,
Like
yes
turn
and
into
no.
glucose?
The other sugars and starches are made of glucose. So if you eat table sugar like you'd sprinkle in tea, it is made of glucose and fructose. There is maltose, which is made of a couple different glucoses, and what else is in maltose? I forget the other. Yeah, we'll actually talk about that. I think next week we'll talk about the different, whenever you see OSE at the end makes a, let me show you here where I have it.
Okay.
Right here. So sugars are identified by OSE. So whenever you see a molecule that has OSE, you know that it is sugar. Glucose, though, is the only one that is directly produced by photosynthesis. So other sugars can be broken down into glucose to power. So yes and no. That's the reason it's yes and no. All right, we're out of time. Anybody have any questions?
Well, can the body make glucose if it doesn't have any available? Like without plants?
Body makes glucose. Well, your body can break down bits of you. You know, like if you don't eat enough protein, your body will start taking apart your muscles. You have galactose, which is stored. You have glycogen and sorry, glycogen. You have glycogen, which is a form of glucose. It's combined with a couple other things, and that is stored in your muscles. So your body can break it down. What I don't believe your body can do is take like individual carbon, hydrogens, and oxygen and put them together in a way that makes glucose. I'm gonna look that up to be sure, but it has ways of turning other things into glucose. That I know it can do. I don't think it can completely make it the way a plant does. You know, we'd have to stand out in the sun and, you know, open up our solar panels and start making our own in order to do that. So yeah, I think the answer to that is a no, but I'm gonna double check. All right. Great class today, everybody. Thanks for coming. Have a great week. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.